as entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Stevie is a registered dietitian and endurance athlete focused on helping athletes fuel their goals while maintaining health and happiness. She holds a degree in dietetics and nutrition from SUNY Buffalo State College and applied nutrition from Northeastern University. As a board-certified sports nutrition specialist, Stevie has guided hundreds of athletes to improve their performance and recovery without guilt or restriction. Having completed 10 Ironman triathlons, she knows firsthand the importance of nutrition for athletes. Stevie has written for Run, Try, Bike, Runner's World, Outside, Bicycling, and Triathlete magazines. She volunteers with Girls on the Run, and we finish together. Outside of sports, she enjoys exploring new trails and spending time with her dog. So, Stevie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. And I have to say, congratulations for being the first person in my hometown of Buffalo for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
You're number
Go
one
Bills!
here. We got to do Go Bills, exactly. I think it's legally required in Buffalo.
Hit the Josh Allen thumbs up too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a few things that are legally required, and we can never have ranch on our wings, and we have to like Buffalo. So we have to like the Buffalo Bills. So that's kind of our things.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate it. So what I loved, I know we heard a little bit about you in the intro, but I really love to hear people explain what is your ninja skill.
Yeah, my ninja skill, I would say my ninja skill is helping people have healthier relationships with food and exercise so they can, chase goals or just focus on longevity and being strong and healthy as we all get older.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important. And because, there's a reason why we call the standard American diet the SAD diet. And it's a very accurate, it's a very accurate acronym, just because our diets are terrible. We've seen it happen since about the 70s. Obesity is really a high issue. So I think it's a really important part of our ecosystem is to be able to learn how to do that, to eat properly. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get into it?
Oh, man.
How did you get into nutrition?
It was a long and winding path to get me to where I am today in my home office. But I grew up an athlete. I played team sports. I played collegiate lacrosse briefly at SUNY Brockport. I was a goalie and I hated running. So fast forward to switching my major to dietetics and nutrition, moving back to Buffalo, stopping playing team sports. And I was like, oh, I have always been active in my life, and I wasn't active for a whole semester because I was burnt out from, playing sports my entire life. So then I could barely run more than a quarter mile, and I got into running in 2008 and ran my first full marathon, the Buffalo Marathon, in 2009. And then the endurance sports life for me took off. I did my first full Ironman triathlon in 2012. I've done 10 cents, ultra marathons, all of that. So I bring up the sports side of things because I never planned to be a sports dietitian and kind of specialize in sports nutrition. I started my career in hospitals in Washington, D.C. The VA is where I ended because I wanted to help people. And I'm an extrovert and I love connecting with people. I love conversations. And eventually during my time in DC and doing all of these endurance sports, the two worlds merged, and here I am today in my 4th year of business as a private practice owner. And let me tell you, my mom at one point when I was in DC is like, you're going to own your own business someday. And I was like, okay, lady.
Which I think a very different experience than some of us have had as well, where it's sort of like we scare people. I like the fact that your mom was kind of a cheerleader from the beginning and she believed in you before you did, which I love.
Yeah, I just never thought I wanted to do all of the work that's required to run a healthy, successful business. I just liked the dietitian side of things and connecting with patients. And I did really enjoy my experience working in the hospitals and clinical nutrition because it's very different than what I do now in my private practice. So I was like, well, I really like clinical nutrition and, I can clock in and clock out and leave the work at home, at work and home is home. Right.
Yep.
But Moms are usually right, is what I learned.
Generally, yeah, there's a sixth sense there that they just kind of know what's happening, and they know, sometimes they see stuff in you. I've had a number of people in general like this where they see something in you and they
Mhm.
know it's different and they
Mhm.
see that potential. And, I think we all have people like that in our lives. And
Yep.
it's an interesting relationship because it's often before we figure it out, and we'll be out there going, no, that's never going to happen. And then it does.
Here we
We
are,
find out we're wrong. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's been nice because, some people and like newer dietitians ask me like, "Oh, how did you start your private practice? Should I start one now?" I was like, there's really no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of mine, part of it was like sink or swim. I
Hmm.
had like quit my full-time job to go to grad school because in my head I was like, "Oh, this is a valid reason to quit my job and move back to Mexico while
Uh-huh.
I figure things out."
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like part of it was like sink or swim. Like, okay, like I got bills, I got to work. But then the other half of it was like, okay, I've worked with some contract companies, I've worked in clinical, and now I want to help people in a way that feels good to me. And it feels like I can actually like get in there and help them rather than just be like, here's this plan, here's a 60-minute call, good luck, see you later.
Yeah.
So it was inspired by both things out of necessity, but also a desire to help people how I want to help people.
Exactly. Exactly. So what was it like? Full transparency, I think just about everyone's idea of being in a hospital and hospital dietitian is less than flattering. Some people think hospital food. I think somebody said once, the doctors are white, the nurses are green, and the food is gray. What was that experience like to you? Because it sounds like you had a good experience there. So I want to hear the other side of that coin. You know?
Yeah, and a lot of this is just like a lack of knowledge to no one's fault of like
Yeah, yeah.
what dietitians actually do.
Yes.
Yes, there
Yeah.
are food service dietitians that, help with like actually, that was part of school was food
Yeah.
service and like mass quantity recipes and like coming up with menus that hit certain nutrition benchmarks that are
Got it.
required by law and all of that. My end, it was inpatient and outpatient. So it was direct patient care. So like I wasn't in charge of the food. Like, yes, I did recommendations of like, oh, this person has type 2 diabetes. We're going to want to make sure like the diet is, going to match up with their needs. And we'd make those recommendations. But a lot of it was more assessing their overall nutrition status and is like, okay, this person is diabetic, has wounds that are healing, or like they have GI issues, or, whatever either acute and or chronic reason that brought them into the hospital is okay, what are my recommendations that I can give the medical team and have them ordered through the kitchen, though not the most ideal food that is going to be most supportive to their overall health and like healing in that very sick state. And
Mhm.
some of it was education.
Yeah.
At the VA, I worked in I was a dietitian in the clinic of head and neck cancer
Mhm.
patients with
Okay.
veterans. And, that's very nutrition focused because, it's all cancers from the neck up. Most of them had all their teeth removed before they underwent um, chemo and radiation. And,
Mhm.
it's coming up with, okay, this person needs to be on a tube feed, or how are we going to come up with a plan so we can support their nutrition needs during this like very demanding aspect of like their treatment and their healing afterwards. So, dietitians have a lot more education than people give them credit for. I was
Yeah.
basically a chemistry minor,
Right.
but biochemistry, biology, all of it, microbiology. So it's not as well known and probably one of the least respected of the allied health professionals, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, just because everybody on the internet is also a nutrition expert. So
And I think one of the things to go into is there's a difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. And
yes,
go into that a little because we keep hearing them as buzzwords, and I think a lot of people think they're the same thing. And from
yes,
what I've learned, they very much are not. Yeah.
very much not.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is, first of all, one of the big things I always kind of point out is that I have a code of ethics that I have to adhere to
Mhm.
within professional practice.
Got it.
Basically, whenever I do anything, it's always do no harm, number one.
Mhm.
Somebody who did a weekend textbook certification,
Well, it's
um,
gonna be different.
but when you're like just like high level, you have to take several years of coursework in food and nutrition sciences, physiology, anatomy, other subjects. Now it's master's degree required.
Mhm.
When I was in school it was not, but I do have my master's in nutrition.
Mhm.
Then you have to complete at least 1,000 hours of supervised practice to gain real world experience. We aren't paid like doctors are, but think like
Yeah.
shorter residency like a doctor.
Yeah.
Then you have to pass the national credentialing exam. Then you have to maintain it with continuing education
Mhm.
every 5 years. And then meet the state's requirements to practice as a dietitian. So then you have to get licensure in the state, depending on the state. Um, and then I said I'm a sports dietitian, so I have more letters after my name. The CSSD credential, which is certified oh my god,
It's all good.
sports specialist in sports
Mhm.
specialist in dietetics.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact thing. So that was I had to submit that I had 2,000 hours of one-on-one time working with athletes in particular, and then sit for another exam that I have to sit for every 5 years.
Okay. So a lot, it's much more than I'm going to take this 4-hour course, which I mean, a lot of nutritionists have some training, but it's not anywhere near as extensive as a dietitian.
Yeah, so that was my mouthful, but it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
And like, there's times where that can be helpful, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, what I see in my practice is people are like, oh, well, I worked with this macro counting coach and it worked really well for a while, but now everything I'm not sleeping, my hair is falling out, like I can't go to the bathroom, I can't stop gaining weight, I
Mhm.
have these injuries. So, you know, I say nutrition is simple, but it's not.
Mhm. Yeah.
So some of these nutrition coaches are keeping me in business. So
You're all good.
I
It's all good.
I mean, I hate to see and the thing that really bothers me though is that by the time people get to me, they're like, I can't believe it's gotten this bad. Like they're almost like embarrassed. And I was like,
Yeah.
you don't need to be ashamed. Like this is not your fault that like you
Mhm.
wound up here because
Yeah.
look at the people on the internet. Like I see people who barely passed chemistry in high school posting like all this stuff like
Mhm.
I was like, you barely passed chemistry. Why are you telling people how to eat?
Yeah.
And it's a little weird out there, but
Well,
I was
and that's
like,
intentionally why I wanted to ask that question is there is this big notion that nutritionists and dietitians are the same, or even maybe a little different, that people don't understand the huge gap between the two. Yeah. And
yes.
dietitians have something very specific, and you guys have very, like, you even went farther with sports nutrition. And one of the reasons, like, I go to a massage therapist who's also has a bachelor's in kinesiology and is a sports medicine
Mhm.
massage therapist. And I go to him specifically because of that sports. I figured if you're dealing with athletes at the top of their game and they are in the best shape possible, it's the extreme end of things, at least in
Yeah.
my thoughts. So, I think that, that it gives you also an additional level. You're working with people that would be in significantly better shape than I think I ever will be.
Really? I mean, I've worked with Olympians and like professional triathletes, but I work with the, person who's like, I'm not really training for a race, but like I'm pretty active and learning how to support their body, right? And not like kind of cut through some of that noise because a lot of what you hear out there doesn't really apply to people who are working out like an hour a day,
Mhm.
hour plus 5, 6 days a week. Um, and it's just very different. And while I obviously learned a lot in my schooling, like
Mhm.
sports nutrition wasn't a part of my curriculum. Some programs at least have a class on it now, but it's just very different than the average person. And then we have the complexities of like, okay, maybe this person is diabetic, but they want to exercise. That's where the medical nutrition therapy can come in too. Like, okay, we have these things going on. We know exercise is important, but we
Mhm.
can't just like, we have to, maneuver that a little bit differently as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of these nutrition coaches also don't have any counseling experience and motivational interviewing. That's a big piece of the education and the education I continue to do on my own that doesn't count towards my research.
Uh-huh.
Um, because to me, it's like the why behind our choices
Yeah.
is what matters more than I mean, I do care what you're eating, but like if you're anxious about every meal, like we gotta get to the bottom of that because that's not helping you at
Hmm.
all.
Or are you using food as a coping mechanism? And I think that's something that's a big deal as well. And
Yep.
where, you're not using it as nourishment. What it should be used at is basically just, and with a food, with so much food around us that is designed to be addictive and has not a whole lot of nutritional value, it's hard to find that balance, right? Especially
Yeah.
if it's let's just do this quick thing, Hey, I ate some crap over the weekend too myself, and it was just because that was quick and easy, and I didn't have a whole lot of time, and I just did.
Yep.
We don't think about it. We don't do mindful eating. We just do whatever we want. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that is finding that balance, of course, between the two. Like, okay, sometimes like it's just got to be that quick meal and it's
Mhm.
not the best, but like what can we add to it to just get a little bit more, make it more satiating, make
Yeah.
it more filling. We don't want to make like Chick-fil-A our number one all the time or whatever it is, or like I love pizza. I have
Uh-huh.
pizza usually once a week, but like, okay, we're gonna have a salad on the side. We're gonna make
Yeah.
sure there's enough protein, so it's sometimes about like that halfway because we have to live our lives. Like I definitely
Mhm.
still got ice cream last night because it's
Mhm.
summer
Yep.
and
Mhm.
soft serve in New
Absolutely.
York State is elite.
It's beautiful. Oh yeah. Oh, our pizzas and all of the food that we have, that's not terribly great for you, but it's really good food. I was in an event over the weekend,
Mhm,
and that's one of the things we were talking about was we had a lot of people in from out of town, and we
mhm.
gave them buffalo pizza, Picasso specifically, but
Yep.
because our pizza is, we have a specific place we like, telling them that our food is really good, and we are really good at it. But
Yeah.
I think I when I started learning that also the order that I eat food in has a huge impact. I had a CGM for a while, and or
Mm.
continuous glucose monitor, and I would notice if I had a salad first, then protein, then my carbs, I would not spike. And learning about stuff like that was fascinating to me, at least. Yeah,
Mhm.
just how we
Yeah.
do and what we can. Might be a bad meal, but we can make it slightly better by having it. So, that was kind of
No
cool.
such thing. Bad. No, no, no. We
I
don't we
know.
don't give food moral value.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh,
All
it
right.
has no moral value.
I
It is
like
what
that.
it is. Yeah, this
Mhm.
is a lot of the relationship with food, how we think about food, how we talk about food, and even how we just like approach it in our heads is a lot of what I like to do. Because
Mhm.
then when we don't give those food, you hear about people like, oh, I can't keep peanut butter in the house, or I can't keep X, Y, or Z in the house. That is
Mhm.
giving that food power. So
Okay.
then we're fixating on it. Plus the
Yep.
nutrition side of things, right? Like if you're not eating enough,
Okay.
and then you're like you don't eat till 10 a.m. And then like by 3 o'clock you're ravenous. It's like, well, yeah, because your body's hungry and
Mm.
needs energy. So then you have this food that you think you have no willpower around and you give it all of this power, like peanut butter. And then
Uh-huh.
like, of course you're gonna eat the peanut butter jar. So it's
Yeah.
a mix of how we think about our foods, but also, okay, how can we structure our day
Okay.
so we're feeling satiated and actually nourished so we don't put ourselves on that big roller coaster where we make less than ideal choices for
Yeah.
ourselves.
Exactly. Interesting. I like that. Huh.
Welcome.
Yeah. And I think it is, a relationship with food. I know I found that with myself, and I do put a value. I have been putting a value on it, which I'll have to try that around. Yeah, but I have noticed that, it's like for me, it's, I won't have any more than a pint of ice cream in the house at any one time because it will be eaten in a sitting.
Mhm.
That's my kryptonite.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
interesting to hear you
it's
say
so
that.
it's so common. I mean, I even used to feel that way. I'm like, oh well, I can't have this because I'm like, I'm just like sit down and eat it all at once. And then I was like,
Mhm.
oh, once I learned things, this is like
Yeah.
before I was in school, I was like, oh, I
Interesting.
just structure my day and eat time things out differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, like every now and then I'll be like, oh, I really want chocolate, but I always have some sort of chocolate in the house. And I have like a handful of whatever, a couple of
Mhm.
Reese's or whatnot, and then I'm done. I'm
Mhm.
satisfied and I move along on my day. So
Mm.
like that's kind of like the end goal with the relationship with food, right? Is that
Okay.
like you're like, oh, I recognize I want some ice cream, but I can enjoy like a bowl of it, a small bowl of it, and not feel sick, not feel guilty, and but also not like have that draw to keep going back and finish the whole pint, right?
Yeah. And yeah, dealing with the mindset as well, like you said earlier, making sure that we know why we're doing it and working on
Yeah.
that too, which I think is great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's so much information out there, and I won't put a value judgment on it.
You're a
There's so
fast
much information about
learner.
that. What we hear a lot of stuff like meal prepping and all of these other things, and where do I get started? And there's a lot of people that are truly so who is it? The Fit Fat Fit, Drew something. I can't remember his last name. He basically is a personal trainer and had nutrition background and basically made himself fat, gained 60 pounds, and then lost it again to know about the psychological need behind food and where that addiction falls in.
Mhm.
So, I hear a lot of people, having trouble with that who might be really stuck in that addiction going, I can't get out of it. Where do
Mhm.
they start? Like, what is a point where they know something's wrong? There's all of this information around, these extreme diets and various other things. What have you found in your clients to be the best way to just start that journey?
They work with me.
There you go. I love
Or
that.
another dietitian, right?
Yep, yep.
Because if there's these feelings of addiction, that I feel there's usually more that needs to be unpacked,
Yes.
right? Just
Yeah.
kind of like I work with a lot of clients with disordered eating and eating disorders, and
Mhm.
like those actions are done out of shame,
Mhm.
not so you're or like this need to control, manipulate, right? So there's
Mhm.
usually something more underlying, but like
Mhm.
a tangible thing that they can do
Mhm.
is please eat breakfast. Just like start, because usually I see people in those cycles where they like don't eat breakfast, then they're starving, then they overeat, then they feel sick, then they wake up and they're not hungry.
Mhm.
Just start by eating some protein and a little carb and a little color, or so like fruits and vegetables
Mhm.
within an hour of waking up,
Mhm.
and then try to eat like every 3 to 4 hours during the day. Just
Okay.
start with that consistency and make it satiating. It doesn't, and when I say like color, I
Mhm.
always tell people in meals and like balanced plates, it doesn't have to be pretty or like these fancy meal preps. All these has like steam bag broccoli for $1 that's always in my freezer. Maybe it's
Uh-huh.
that and a couple of eggs and a piece of toast, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
balanced plate that doesn't cost crazy amounts of money
Yeah.
or a lot of time. People like to they feel like they have to overcomplicate things when they're making these health changes. And
Mhm.
you really just have to start and find things that you like that are simple, and like everybody's busy.
Mhm.
So like what are some simple balanced meals that you can put together?
Mhm.
And then once you start feeling more comfortable prepping or eating consistently, maybe you explore some different recipes or, a little bit more complicated cooking, but it doesn't need to be a meal with an capital M, as one of my clients likes to say.
Exactly. And I heard a while ago that because of the increase in the price in food and various things, there are a lot of people shopping at the dollar store for food.
Mhm.
And just that was a bit alarming. And because, I can meal prep and I do it relatively inexpensively. And I do tend to buy organic things. I just have less of it because the value is better. I get more bang for my buck, basically. But, it's nice to hear you, it's interesting to hear you say that because I think it's important to some people who are trying to make that decision between do I buy decent food or do I pay my rent? So
Yeah, I
you don't
mean,
even rich.
I
Yeah.
eat conventional produce.
Yeah.
I don't buy organic.
Yeah.
It can't, it's not affordable. I mean,
Mhm.
if you have the luxury in your budget to like push and pull on certain things, like
Mhm.
I'll usually spend a little bit more on my eggs.
Mhm.
But like produce, as long as it looks okay, I wash it. Conventional is usually the way I go. So
Yeah.
like it's all about that flexibility of like, okay, where can I like pay a little bit more? But like an organic banana, that banana's got a peel. You're gonna be just fine, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep. 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 You're good to go. I love it.
And then frozen fruits and vegetables too.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're frozen at peak ripeness. So
Yeah.
that's like the highest nutrient quality that you're gonna get. So like in the winter, especially around here in Buffalo,
Mhm.
it's frozen, all day. And like even like cherries, right? They're more expensive fresh.
Mhm.
So like buying them frozen and putting them in my oatmeal is something I do to just like I love cherries. So
Cherries
I'm
are awesome.
sad that
Cherries.
cherry season is almost over. But
Exactly right. For me, it's cherries and raspberries. Those are
oh
beautiful things. I
yes.
love them. But a lot of people don't realize that when you have the frozen fruits, they may not look quite perfect, but that's because they're seconds. I mean, they're the ones that people don't want to buy because they don't look right. They still have the same nutrient value. And yeah. I like what you said that they're also at the peak of freshness. They
Hmm.
haven't been sitting out for a while. They
Yeah,
haven't.
they got that all those nutrients locked in when they get frozen. So
For sure.
It's an easy way to get more in.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So as we're getting towards the end of things here, I do want to ask one question and that is, and you have an interesting answer to this question that I really would like you to go into, because I think there are people in this situation who feel like they're being judged because they can't answer the question. So I wanted to hear your background to it, because I like the way you said it. What is a book or podcast that has had a significant impact?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, one of my values is transparency. So I thought about this question for a while when I was swimming this morning, and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to answer." So when I started in my business, I burnt myself out, as many entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
And I dug myself out of burnout, being chronically overstressed, all of that, and went to therapy and worked very hard on boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud of where my boundaries are
Uh-huh.
right now. And one of my boundaries is that when I am not, especially like as we talked about nutrition, wellness, health field, I can't even open my Instagram without like something in my face about it.
Yes.
So I am very intentional about really not listening to self-help, wellness, health books, or podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, in my downtime, I just need to turn my brain off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this has helped me show up for my clients more full and like not tired,
Yeah.
so I can help them better.
Yeah.
So I don't listen. I'm a true crime girly, and I know that's not going to be helpful to this audience.
Okay.
Um, but if you guys ever need true crime recommendations, go to my Goodreads.
I love it.
But I will say I have a couple friends who have podcasts that are in the running space. My friend Jonathan has For the Long Run, which is basically just like conversations about the more human side of sport and running and challenges and overcoming. So I do love those episodes. And then my friends Nick and Amanda started a new podcast called Between Two Coaches, and it's more kind of breaking down different things that athletes face and some of this wellness fitness culture that is toxic. So they break that down on their podcast and have some good conversations about it too.
Mhm.
Those are the ones I listen to sometimes on my runs because I feel like I'm talking with my friends.
Exactly. Exactly. I love it. I love
Yep,
that Between Two Coaches. Is that kind of like Between Two Ferns?
exactly. You nailed it.
Okay. I had a friend of mine just putting together a podcast studio, and he's like, "I'm going to put a couple of plants, up at the stage." I'm like, "Not ferns. Just please don't. Just trust me."
But please do. I would love it.
Like, but they explain the joke, and a joke is one of those things. If you have to explain it, it loses all of its relevancy. So
That's fair. That's fair.
anyway, Stevie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Truly appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Stevie, check out the link in the description.